because these waves of pain, of labor, they're not mine. They come from somewhere else. They kind of belong to life itself. It moves over generations, and this is it's trying to turn me out inside out. It's not very kind. Yes, it doesn't really care about me, but I have to work with these waves. I experienced them as a monster going through my body, but I had to not just object to them and try to get them away. That would be dangerous, actually. I had to accept them, to take them on and keep pushing when they came. I had to continue their movement in order to give birth. So I wasn't active purely, and I wasn't passively purely. I was pactive.
Hi everyone, welcome to Mind the Shift. I am Anders Bolling. In this episode, we will talk about our perception of the self and how this perception affects the way we live our lives and how that perception affects society in general. My guest today is philosopher Jonna Bornemark. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're a professor in philosophy at the Södertörn University here in Stockholm.
Yes.
And
that's something called the Center for Studies in Practical Knowledge, which makes the philosophy slightly different, I would say.
Slightly different than ordinary philosophy?
Yes. As our students are all experience-based, they need to have been working for at least 3 years in order to take part of our courses. And then when we teach, we take our starting point in their experiences, and they write very closely to a certain situation. And then we add philosophy to that in order to understand this situation in a much richer way. So we are very close to practical knowledge, of course, that's our subject, and very close to everyday life.
Yeah.
And I've been working there for, well, a bit more than 10 years. And I know that it has transformed my philosophy and my interests a bit. So. Okay,
wonderful. Yeah, well, I've just read a couple of your books, and we're going to delve into the subjects of those books. And you apart from being a professor and teaching at the university, you're also fairly known in this country, in Sweden. Have become lately because you have, because of appearances in the media, in the radio
mostly.
Mostly, sometimes in the TV also, perhaps, and by way of publishing books. Several books that have been well received in a good way, mostly, I think. So I think people appreciate your way of, as far as I've heard you and read you, you have a way of, conveying complicated and deep philosophical questions, but at the same time having a human closeness and some kind of everydayness, if that's a word.
I think that's exactly what I trained by this teaching, but also by leading philosophical cafes. So I enjoy talking philosophy to people who are not academical philosophers.
Do you also talk philosophy with people you meet randomly at cafes and things like that?
Well, it's organized.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're in a bar, for instance, where people don't recognize you, do you start asking philosophical questions?
I actually try to avoid that.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
I have a day off now. I don't have to speak.
I mean, philosophy is always going on, but you don't always have to talk about it.
It is, yeah. I know. I mean, I consider myself as a philosophically inclined person, but I mean, I'm not a philosopher, but I kind of like that way of thinking, of seeing everything that's happening in life, really.
And I think to be a philosopher, it's not a trademark. I think you can be a philosopher. I don't. Yeah. I like that in that title, that it's not that you need to have this degree and this examina. In a way, I mean, the Greeks, they said we're all philosophers. That's to be a human being.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. Philosophy cannot be separated into some elite or some small group in the society that do philosophy. and then it's separated from the rest of the humans.
No, that's very true, and that's why it's a bit odd that it is a discipline of itself, an academic discipline.
In a way,
But
then of course we can always specialize in everything, and to be a professor of philosophy, I think that is of course something slightly different, because that means that I do it as a profession. And you're knowledgeable about what other philosophers in history have said about different things. Yes, that's one thing. But I think actually if that would be my profession, then I would be a philologist.
Okay.
Sorry, but...
Philologist? I never heard that word.
Philologist is, then you're knowledge in the philosophy of others.
Aha, okay.
A philosopher still has to think on her own.
Well, that's a bit strange then to be a professor of philosophy, because everybody has their own way of thinking about life.
In a way, but it's also collective things.
Yeah,
we do belong to similar traits. The culture does philosophy, or has a philosophy, which is of course not very narrow, but broad and with a spectra, with room for a lot. But we still do it not just as individuals, but also as groups. And I do think that philosophy lives in between, maybe between humans, but also between other species.
Yeah. Exciting. Is it fair to say that what you wrestle with every day when you work is to answer the question, what is a human being?
I would say that's too narrow. The latest book, actually... My latest book, the question that sort of guided me was what is life?
Yeah.
And then actually the basic philosophical question is what is being? And that includes everything that is.
Exactly. Yeah. Exciting. It's to answer that question is a tall order, you might say, but on the other hand, it's also all we have and all we need to do every day.
Yes.
In different ways. So this is just too interesting. I have just too many questions written down here. So we'll see where this leads us. But let's just dive right into it. I want to talk about, of course, the themes of your two latest books. And the themes are, as far as I understand, judgment. Is that the best translation from the Swedish word omdöme? You might say
yes.
Discernment or discretion, perhaps?
Yeah, but judgment is the concept that is used in, for example, Hannah Arendt, that I connect to. And
so judgment it is. And then the latest one is, of course, about pregnancy and with all the implications that has.
And about life.
And about life.
Yes.
So judgment, pregnancy and life.
The small, narrow themes.
And a little bit about sexuality, perhaps also. I have a question about that. So we'll see where this leads us. So anyway, in your second latest book, the horizon is always there. Is that a good translation?
Yes, or the horizons will remain. The
horizons will remain. Yeah, the horizons will remain.
I'm not sure what would be.
Horisonten finns alltid kvar in Swedish. You examine the apparent elimination almost of judgment in our society. Is it that, modern society, you might say, is it that we have, to me, judgment seems like a fairly basic human property.
Yes.
Is it that we have kind of discarded this basic property simply because it's not possible to measure?
Yes, that's how I would see it, and I would say that especially professional judgment is what I'm focused on, as my empirical material comes from my students. These people that have been working in also interhuman professions like teachers and doctors, etc., caretakers of different kinds, and artists and journalists and whatever. And the thing is that within these branches especially, the room for judgment has been the room has been smaller and smaller during the 21st century. Shrunk. And we can also talk about decreased. Is it decreased? Increased? Decreased? Right.
It's gone down.
It's gone down. Room for action, to act. As to act is that you have to have a judgment, that you have to reflect, that you have to, and then you do this, even though you don't know everything. And when you think that you should follow a manual, for example, that is not to act. That is just to obey orders.
There's to be a flesh robot.
Yes, exactly.
Basically.
Exactly. And, Swedish working life has very clearly moved in that direction the last 20 years. And we have names for this. And so.
You talk about, you coin, I think you are the one who has coined these terms that I'm going to mention here. One of them is arcs of paradoxes, that we kind of have situations where there are arcs of paradoxes and where we actually very much need our judgment. If I just can, you can say if I'm getting this wrong, but in my understanding, these arcs of paradoxes are like you're in a situation where you could either act or not act. You could decide to act, or you could decide to not act, which is also a decision to do something. Which do nothing is also doing something. And you could decide to do what everybody else does, or you could decide to do not what everybody else does, but just go by your own feeling, and do what you think yourself is the right thing to do. Or and a third paradox might be that you should break the rules or follow the rules. Break the rules. And these are arcs. I mean, these paradoxes are present simultaneously in this situation, and they form kind of a dome under which this situation unfolds. And sometimes this unfolding of the situation entails, as I mentioned in one of the paradoxes here, entails non-action, to do nothing. And then you speak about you have another word here that I think you've coined, which is to be pactive, pactivity. So can you give some examples of when we are or should be pactive, which I think is a combination of the words passive and active.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Could we wait with the pactivity and just say something about the arches here, firstly?
Shoot.
It's interesting that you connect them. I think that is important. But these arches, the point is that when we act, we always have to act within conflicting desires, conflicting demands within an organization, for example. But these demands are collective, or they belong to a certain organization. They can also be more concrete than the ones you mentioned. For example, to keep a budget and have high quality. We both need to keep both these, but they are also in conflict with each other. And here the arch kind of creates a room, a collective room for judgment. And this is important to me, as when we talk about judgment, we often think just that we are different, that we just, that's why we don't trust it. Then people are just subjective and they just do whatever. And there's no, you can't trust that. But my argument is that we have rooms for collective judgment. And within this arch, we act differently. Someone moves more in that direction, another moves more in that direction. But as long as we stay within this room and we also keep talking to each other, this is a professional room where professional knowledge can be developed. And there's an outside. Well, for example, a policeman that wants to be a pacifist and never ever use violence, well, that is kind of outside the police room, because sometimes violence, it belongs to the room. And then, of course, there's a paradox or a tension field between violence and all human rights, let's say. So you have to act within this room, and here we are collectively. And so my aim here is to point that towards that it's not that we need to trust these rooms where we are together, and we need to develop them in order to develop our judgment. And maybe now I could move on to pactivity.
Yeah, I mean, do they go together, or did I get that wrong?
I don't think I ever connected them, but it's a nice line of thinking.
Passive and active at the same time.
Pactivity, I mean, the concept, I had to coin it in order to understand what it was I did when I gave birth. Actually, I did it 3 times, and I think especially it just puzzled me when I tried to formulate it in philosophical terms, because and also in practices, it's either that we have some traditions where the doctor is, in Swedish we say förlöser, where the doctor is active, delivers, yes,
yeah.
where the doctor is active and the woman is just passive, and this is being done on her, so to say. And then there are other traditions where the woman is giving birth and being very active. And the experience to me was very much active, because these waves of pain, of labor, they're not mine. They come from somewhere else. They kind of belong to life itself. It moves over generations. And this is very strong waves. I gave birth vaginally and had very strong labors. And it's trying to turn me out inside out. It's not very kind. Yes, it doesn't really care about me. But I have to work with these waves. I experienced them as a monster going through my body. But I had to not just object to them and try to get them away. That would be dangerous, actually. I had to accept them, to take them on and keep pushing when they came. I had to continue their movement in order to give birth. So I wasn't active purely, and I wasn't passively purely. I was active. I had to take on this and keep. And then I started to thinking about this concept in other contexts, like in cultural context. We are born into a certain culture. It's so much that I haven't chosen. The tradition I belong to has a misogynist and racist heritage. It's within the culture. It doesn't disappear from one year to another, even if we wanted to. But I'm not, in relation to this, I'm not just a victim of this heritage. Neither am I outside of it and can just cut myself off from this heritage. I have to actively work and change the direction if I want it to go in another direction. So activity, I think it's kind of useful in many contexts. Also in a conversation, I need to be active because I need to listen to what you're saying.
Yes, that's a very good example. It's actually what we're doing right now.
Yes.
When I have to understand what you're saying, so I need to listen very intensely to what you're saying. But at the same time, I need to be active in the conversation so that I can, respond to it if I want to respond or not. It's a
somehow,
constant.
Yes, and let it move into you, take it on, object to what you want to object to, continue to think with what you found valuable, and do it, direct it in your direction.
Yeah.
So I think
it's a useful term.
Yes.
It is.
But tell me, how did you connect the activity to these arches of paradoxes?
No, I was just connecting those two terms because when I was visualizing these domes domes of where things happen, where a situation unfolds, I saw these paradoxes as sometimes being, the activity, as I saw it, was within the arc of one paradox, that you can both kind of
be active and passive.
Be active and passive at the same time. You can understand that it might be a good thing to follow the rules normally, but now it's probably better not to do it, but maybe we should start following them in a little while. Let's see what happens. Let's see what unfolds. So you are kind of you're watching what's happening and assessing it continuously.
Yes.
And then you might change your viewpoint after a while, and
yes.
So that's kind of a activity in as I saw it.
Yes, and I think it's interesting in connection to collectivity. We always belong to collectivity, but we also act as individuals in difference to each other. And here, to take on the collectivity is also has part of this passivity movement. It is already there. I'm not in charge of all of it.
Yeah.
It's there. And then I have to take on, and if I choose a profession, I have somehow to accept this collectivity that I move into. But then I can take it on and give it a new direction or a slightly new turn or something.
Yeah.
So here, yes. And it does create a room where you can emphasize more of the passivity part and just do. as it has been done, following the tradition, or go into the more active side of it and change everything a lot, being very creative.
Yeah, yeah. What about cultural differences? I mean, your book is. I mean, most of your examples are from Sweden or the Western world, I think. But is it a cultural thing, or is it more general, or is it the modern Western world? Because you could think that, for instance, in a country like Sweden, people are more prone to like following rules and not having to make decisions that are difficult in human terms. In other words, many people, I think, here in this country at least, like not to have to look too deeply into themselves before making a decision. So they find it kind of comfortable to know that there are rules to follow, and the rules are the same for everybody. Whereas perhaps in other places, in other countries, people are more prone to trust their judgment rather than trusting rules that have been set there and decided on by some authority. Is that a thing?
It can definitely be cultural changes within this. But what would be then transcultural or is that organizations live within arches of paradoxes? That all organizations have this conflicting values and conflicting demands. So that structure would be the universal side of it. But exactly which conflicts and exactly how we relate in a certain conflict as the one you mentioned, that can of course be culturally different.
Okay.
So that's how I would.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah, good.
And that is also, I'm very fond of the Swedish concept of dela, to share.
Yeah, it's an interesting word because it can mean its opposite.
Yes. It is both what...
It contains its own opposite.
It is both what we share, what we have in common, and what separates us. Teilen in German is the same.
Yeah.
In English...
It's the words share and divide, actually, at the same simultaneously.
Yes. And I heard that in English, the word that comes closest is actually cleavage.
Okay.
Which gives us other connotations.
Other good connotations. Yeah.
Yes. But anyhow, what I think is what connects us here are this structure of conflicting demands. That's what we share. What divides us might be which conflicts and how do we act within this conflict. So what binds us together also separates us. And that's a logical structure that I'm very fond of, actually, because I think it's true.
Yeah. What about personal traits also? I mean, cultural differences, and there are also personal differences. Of course, we know that some people are more, they act more intuitively than others. That's we all know that.
Yes, definitely.
And what about that?
No, of course, and sometimes in Sweden at least, we sometimes talk about judgment as something, as a characteristics. Some people are tall, some have good judgment, some have bad judgment, some have blue eyes. Yeah. And I think that's unfortunate way to formulate it. I think more about it as a kind of knowledge. And as in other kinds of knowledge, we can be differently skilled in it.
So you can train your judgment?
Yes, we can. And we get a better judgment in a room or an organization where there is room for judgment and where we make this explicit or where we work with it and where it's valued than in a room where it has no value. And I think this is important because otherwise, if it's just something that some people have and others don't have, we're just different. We can't do it. We can't organize in relation to it. But I do think that we can. And
we should do it more.
Yes.
What about, speaking of people being more or less intuitive, is intuition in your mind the same thing as judgment?
No, intuition is a word that I don't really work with because it has so many people understand it in different ways, and I haven't worked with it. I haven't given it
your own
a
definition.
certain definition. Sometimes it can be very close to, it often means something that can't be truly rationalized. You can't divide it into different essences and then make them calculable and then decide how to act. It's more on the emotional side, and it's more on today when it's explained, people often talk about it as your brain sort of works faster than you understand yourself. So you get this feeling for how to do before you can see and understand the process. But sometimes it's also used just to, and I don't like. I'm not in favor of just following your gut instinct, for example.
Well, that would be another term that
Yes.
would be close to intuition and
Yes.
all of
But
this. But
I think it's too narrow, because to just follow your gut feeling, then you only follow a certain feeling. But to me, judgment includes many components. It is, first of all, a respect that I don't know everything in this situation, and I have to keep listening. But it's also my own experiences. It is my sense impressions in exactly this situation. It is the feelings. But in professional judgment, it's also a theoretical basis. Manuals can be part of it, and a bodily knowledge can be part of it. So it has many sources. And to just pick out one of them, the feeling, and put in contrast to the rest, that to me is not judgment. Judgment is to use as many sources of knowledge as possible in order to act within this situation where I don't know everything. But then we have some situations where we have to act really fast.
yes,
And because this other sounds like you need a week at least to kind of see what all these components are.
Yeah.
And but when I look into when people, and I have studied this together with my students, a nurse, for example, when she gets a sick person, very sick person at the ER.
Yeah, emergency room.
Emergency room, yes. When she describes that, she actually she never just use one feeling. She uses all her senses to get a sense of what is wrong here. She uses, of course, all her theoretical knowledge. Of course, that is present there. She uses all her experiences, of course. She uses also she knows the rules of the hospitals. And then when she decides what is the best in this situation, she has to kind of, all this is present.
Yeah. But she doesn't have to think about all these things.
No,
I mean,
because it's in her system.
It's in her system. It's automatic.
Yes. And so it's not just to follow a gut feeling. That is too simplistic. It's not what happens.
Yeah, but the interesting example, or the situation that would be interesting to study in that respect then would be somebody who is not a nurse and who encounters a situation where somebody gets hurt, for instance, and there are no nurses or doctors around. You have to do something also very quickly. What do you think happens in that person? Is that person also using the judgment that is available to that person,
Yes.
to her in that situation?
I would say yes, because you know something about first aid, or you've seen on the movie maybe. It's not breathing. I need to see if there's something within the mouth, or if I can give mouth to mouth, or we have some sort of knowledges about this situation. But of course, it might be lacking. And I would use everything I have here. But I think we use concepts like both intuition and gut feeling. I think what we really want to point towards is that we can't calculate it, or we don't really know what components are there. It's the silence within it. And in practical knowledge, we often talk about tacit knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think it's that part that is sort of hidden within the gut feeling, that I don't really know, but I have to do this. But when you look at it closer, it's not just a feeling. It includes much more than that.
Yeah.
So that's...
So yeah, I can understand, and I can appreciate that there is a difference between gut feeling and intuition. But I have a high reverence for for the term intuition and what that entails. And it would be interesting to see if you dive deeper into the concept of intuition at some point and see what you come up with, because I can very well think of intuition being something. And you mentioned the brain before, that the brain processes things faster than we can realize, and before we even realize that the brain has. And I'm not personally even sure that it's the brain that is active. It might be something else, but
maybe the system, the human being as
maybe it's
system,
something non-physical, but that's deeper.
Or maybe the brain is just another side of something that is.
Another side of it, or a
consciousness
filter,
problem.
or a organ that is. Yeah.
I'm not really keen on using talking about consciousness in terms of brain, because as if it was just synapses and causality within a certain kind of materia, which reduces it.
It does, yeah, it does. Gives you a claustrophobic feeling to think that you're inside your skull.
Hans Larsson is a Swedish philosopher who has written about intuition, and I read that book a long time ago. And if I would go move in, I would read that book. It's a very small little book on intuition. Which I remember was very good, but I that's what I would like to continue on that.
Yeah, do that. That would be very interesting. Do you think that there's some part of, let's say, judgment now then, because that's what you've been delving into here, some part of it that is innate, or is it all built up entirely from experience and habits?
No, then of course it's some sort of innate. It's actually the power of life, even, because even though I have all these sources and I can develop them further, it's not what is important in this situation. Is also has to relate. You can never just follow a script. Or because time is always new. This situation never happened before. And sometimes just our habits just work, even though the situation is new. And sometimes they don't. And that's when we really need the judgment. But here, I think that to be able to be such a creature that has something like judgment, it's very, I'm not sure I have the right words for this, but it's intimately connected to being alive.
Yeah.
To be in touch with the newness of the situation. Because if it...
To being intensely present.
Yes. And to be, as we are alive, it means that we are timely creatures. We are always within this newness, as each.
Yeah, well, time is another concept that we could discuss, but does it even exist? So anyway.
Yes, but at least that's a huge discussion, of course. But to me, I think it's important to acknowledge that something about life that is always in connection to acting without knowing everything, and to be in relation to both the future and what is new by using the powers and the patterns of yesterday, and that is the pactive movement.
Yeah. So it all goes together.
Yes. So to me, it can't be. The whole point that it can't be mathematized is because we don't see all of it as it is what sees. It's the capacity of seeing, the capacity of living. You see. So when we look at it, it becomes an object. And it's no longer what sees.
No.
You see, and this is also intimately linked to the concept of consciousness.
Yeah.
When we make the consciousness to an object, like the brain, that we can watch, it's no longer what watches.
I know, yeah.
So that paradox, which is not only Western.
I actually interviewed just a couple of weeks ago philosopher Bernardo Kastrup. Are you familiar with him? He's an idealist.
Don't think so.
No, but I mean, he's into this, what is consciousness? That's the whole... the whole thing that he's into, and he talks about us being whirlpools in a stream, and we're all in consciousness. This doesn't mean that everything is conscious, but we're all in consciousness. One big stream of consciousness, and we are all, I mean, a separate human being isn't really separate. That's an illusion, but we are whirlpools in a stream, and you can see a whirlpool in a stream, and it's definitely a separate thing. You can see there's a whirlpool, but it consists of nothing other than the stream itself. It consists of the same thing as the stream. So we're all...
I'm not so very far away from that understanding. But then we, of course, need to discuss what is consciousness and what is matter. Because to me, that is very close to also a concept of matter. And that might be a problem with the old idealist tradition, at least, that we have to... They're not materialists. And we have this old and very frustrating understanding of matter as something which is just passive and which is just affected by causality from the outside. But
we know now from quantum physics and quantum mechanics and all the measurements that have been made since 40 years back that's not true.
Exactly, but we still...
There is no matter.
Yes, or matter is not what we thought it was.
Exactly.
I like that concept. And I work with Giordano Bruno, who lived in the 16th century. And he has interesting concepts of matter.
Yeah.
Yes. So
already then.
It's
impressive. And this brings us over to my next question here, because I have one of the favorite things or thoughts in your book, the Horizon book here, is what I would call the fine art of not knowing. And you've already touched upon it here, and you speak beautifully about horizons of not knowingness, of uncertainty, and they never disappear; they just move away. So when you reach that island that you have aimed for, that was on the horizon, then the horizon is still just as far away as it was before. So it never disappears. It's always out there somewhere. Is that something we should celebrate, that the horizons always move?
Yes.
And
because
why?
it means that the world is always bigger than our knowledge about the world, and that is. I became, when I think about that, it belongs to euphoric feeling. We can keep on, and this is also very Brunian actually. We can keep on understanding. We can explore the world in new ways, and it will turn up in new. It's more interesting things to find out. And to me, well, I like that. To others, of course, it can also be connected to, and to me as well, of course, to anxiety that we don't know. We're not in control. There are, of course, other spectra of feelings that can be present here. But to me, it's very connected to the positive feelings. And it
is very much about how you look at it.
Yes.
I mean, every situation is as you say, every situation is new, even though we can sometimes perceive it as an ordinary situation, but it's not. Nothing is ordinary. Ever.
Yes. And also, but of course, I mean, when it comes to suffering, when it comes to really hard situations, and you want to save someone's life and you don't know, maybe to celebrate not knowing. It's not what's really on your mind.
You have a point. You have a point there.
Yes. So of course there are negative sides to it, and it can't be too large. We need the balance with some sort of order. We need the balance with the... Actually, we can only afford that the pleasure of not knowing when we also have some sort of safe ground. If the world is just chaotic and just moving and just... it's total anxiety. And that's not a nice place to be in. So it needs to be... I think I can be euphoric in relation to it, as I have an island that I stand on. And that when I don't have to stand on this island, but tomorrow maybe I go to this other island that was on the horizon, but then I stand on that one.
But if if the island that you stand on all the time,
or sit in the boat,
or the boat that you sit in continuously is your inner self, if that is a thing. I don't know. Different people have different ways of expressing what this is: the higher self, the inner self, or the essence of what is you. If you feel safe there, then the world would never appear scary to you, even if it's at a superficial level chaotic out there. You would feel safe, and you would be calmer inside yourself, and you would be able to understand what to do in that situation also.
Yes.
So then you would never come to that anxiety place.
I think you can always come to that anxiety place. Otherwise, you're not human. Because if your children, your lovers, your world is totally threatened, you're kind of you're not human if you don't feel anxiety. Yeah. Right.
I hear you.
Yes.
Good.
But as you say, but I agree with what you're saying. Certain that you can live with the norms changing, that you're not threatened by. We often feel threatened by so many things that aren't really dangerous.
No.
So we could.
They're
definitely
just like we call in Swedish we have this expression hjärnspöke.
Yes.
Ghosts in our brain. I mean, it's just imaginary threats often because we live in the future or the past. We don't live in the present moment.
Yes. And also that others live in a different way, that they look different to us, that they act differently. Yeah. These sorts of things. If you're more calm in yourself, that doesn't have to be a threat.
No, because then they can as just you said be before, exciting. That's exciting.
Yes.
Wonderful. A new kind of human being. I've never seen this kind of human being before. How interesting.
Yes.
And then just go to that horizon.
Yes.
Yeah. So would you say that science handles these eternally moving horizons?
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, especially when it comes to the big questions, of course, we've mentioned some of them. What is a human being? Where do we come from? What is consciousness? What happened in ancient times? What is reality? Does the scientific and academic and education system acknowledge the vast not knowingness, as you see it?
It's our life nerve. If it wasn't there would be no higher education and no research. But in our systems, we're not very good at acknowledging it.
No.
I've been talking at a lot of universities, more talking about the organization and so on. And we are kind of locked in systems. Well, if I write an application to get a research project, I have to know so much and point out exactly what it is that I do not know, and to point out exactly how what I will do in order to find out what I do not know. So the not knowing is just shrinked into a little zigzag.
It's so sad.
Piece. It's very sad, actually. But that is in the paperwork. If that is also what happens, if we start to think that this is research, that this is then, and of course research is done in this way sometimes, when you just move within the paradigm and you just build it collectively, and we find small pieces of the puzzle together. So sometimes it's like that, but then we will never find something really new. Like the big exciting thoughts are not pieces in a puzzle. We talk about paradigms sometimes, and when we have to shift paradigm, we have to. They will never fit into a project application.
I just heard the other day that Nikola Tesla, who's very popular right now, I think his popularity in some circuits, some spiritual circuits, for instance, is surpassing Albert Einstein's. Anyway, he was a very intelligent and intuitive person, I think, and he said something along the lines of the best ideas that he came up with was when he wasn't doing anything. He was just mainly sitting and feeling in, or meditating, or thinking, or whatever, and then the ideas came to him. And that's kind of a basic research thing, because if you want to research, if you're a scientist and you want to do some research, and you have already from the beginning put up some conditions around this piece of research that you're going to conduct, then it's really, you've already decided what you're going to come up with in a way.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the big problem.
But then where does it happen? And this is, of course, also a question that you can ask any creative person, an artist.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yes, it's the same thing. And, well, to me at least, it rarely happens when I'm just sitting on my own thinking. And I know a lot of artists, it happens when you're within the matter. For example, if you're working with clay, it happens in relation to the matter. To me, it often happens in conversation with others. I think, and this...
you create when you speak, as you speak.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
That's wonderful. A wonderful way of creating, actually.
Yes, well, actually, I like also going on the train because it moves.
Yeah.
And of course, in reading, it's a sort of a conversation. So of course, that in philosophy, that is a basic practice.
Yeah.
But the practices are, well, it can come wherever. But I think, and it can't really be institutionalized. And that's our, of course, paradox here, that we have to find institutions for this and structures of power and money, but without institutionalizing something that can't. So that's another paradox which we have to which we have to live within.
Yeah. I would say, I don't know if you agree with me, that trust is closely related to judgment.
Yes.
It seems to me that many of the rules in our society, and all societies perhaps, are based on the assumption that you can't trust others. Hence the need for rules. I don't know if you're familiar with Rutger Bregman, Dutch historian, who's written a book called Humankind in English. It's in Swedish. It's I grunden god.
Jaha, yes.
You know about that
yes.
book, yeah. And he debunks many of the myths that we have about certain events where, well, the story is that without rules there's chaos.
Yes.
But he debunks many of those. I don't have to go into the details of what he's speaking about. But anyway, do you think maybe we have been fooled by our rules for eons? That I mean, chaos would ensue without hierarchies and rules.
Yes, I think this is really important in a democracy. In a democracy, we need to have trust in the judgment of other people. If we don't have a democracy. And if we think that society is obeying rules that we somehow decided together, then we're kind of also leaving the trust. Of course, well, some rules are very convenient. We drive on the right side of the road. It's good. We need rules.
Yeah, practical rules.
Practical rules. And so I'm not against rules, but they cannot be how we live, what we do. What we are. We need to trust this living organic motion that we are part of. But of course also, and I think the important thing here is to bring up conflicts and keep them explicit. It will always be struggles of power within living beings. There will always be conflict. But the question is, how do we deal with them? How do we have a space, a room to also be curious about these differences? And where do we need to act together and in the same way? When do we really need to do that? And when don't we? When can we allow this space of differences? So if we stick too closely to an idea of rules, we belong to a hierarchical society which puts its trust in certain people and not in other people. And if we really need to, I think we might need to reinvent democracy, and then this needs
that would be also to liberate many people in a way.
Yes.
To realize that you have agency of your own, and you can trust other people because they have agency, and they trust you. You trust them. They trust you. That's a liberating feeling. Instead of being, having the notion that you are only a citizen, and what can I do? I can't do anything.
Yes.
I have to trust my leaders. and follow the rules. And
exactly. And the important thing for such a system to work is that we are not guided, but of the feeling that that egoism and altruism are different opposites.
Mm-hmm.
And I just try to make what is good for me, because the thing is that if and Aristotle said this, this is his basis for politics. Yeah, I can't be well in a society that aren't well. I can't live a good life if I'm within a situation where others are not living a good life. So politics is about creating this room where we can create a good life together.
Maybe more politicians should read Aristotle then.
Oh yes.
So, but you agree that it can be convenient for rulers to that people have this idea that you can't trust others.
Yes, of course. And I've seen that often in some companies or in some organizations. It's of course much more convenient for those in the top if people below them just do as they're told in a way. And they think they are more in control and that things are more visible to them. The thing is that they fool themselves. Because in such organizations...
The leaders, you mean?
Yes, the leaders.
Yeah.
They fool themselves. Because in such organizations also things often start to happen that aren't told. Because you don't have any trust. And if the leaders don't trust...
That's why they're so surprised. Some dictators are very surprised sometimes when the people rises up. And,
exactly.
Where did this come from?
Yes, yes. So, but this can of course... that's why we have democracy.
Yeah.
That's why, to me, it's so central.
Trust and judgment are the mortar of the.
Yes, we have to believe in people. We have to believe that people can live together and think and be wise, and take responsibility for others.
Yeah,
and that of course is connected to upbringing and how the culture, which direction the culture is going.
Yeah. Okay, let's get a little bit more sensory here, perhaps, or however I should put it. Your latest book here just came out the other day. I Am the Sky and the Sea is my translation. I don't know if you like that.
Yes.
Jag är himmel och hav. And it's about pregnancy and what that entails for the humanness of us, for women, but also for men, for all mankind, really.
And actually for all mammals, and maybe all life in some parts, that this is also what does not separate us from other animals.
True.
So it's this is also why I objected when you said that it's about what human beings are.
Yeah.
It's not only about human beings. We share a lot of this with other mammals and then with other life forms.
Well, like other things we do, like we eat and we go to the toilet.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
All those things are also common with all life, almost. Maybe not viruses, but from bacteria and up.
That's where you normally draw the line.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. That's very, very, very interesting.
Which also shows between the virus that we draw the line, what is a living entity, between the virus and the bacteria, also shows that the line where what is life and what is not life is not digital. It is.
No, it isn't.
It's a scale, just like the child in the fetus growing on.
Yeah,
in this continuum.
Talk about that, because it's really. I mean, you're not. We are conditioned to believe that we are separate. We were touching on this before, that maybe we're not. Maybe we're just whirlpools in a stream. But anyway, like Bernardo Kastrup says, but we are conditioned to believe that we are separate entities, and then when you're pregnant, you're one, but then you're not one. You're suddenly two, and you're the vessel of life itself. And I mean, the point at which this starts is not digital. You can't. I mean, I haven't been pregnant, but I can imagine that you can't pinpoint exactly when it. Now we're two.
No.
Now I'm one, and now we're two. But so this is really magical.
Yes, and also this becomes really central in discussions, political discussions, like abortion.
Exactly, I was going to ask about that, because you discussed the difficulty in assessing exactly when life begins, and this is, as you say, very significant for the debate about abortion. Do you have, and you don't pinpoint the any time frame in the book, but do you have your own view of when life begins, or some? you have any ideas about when that could be, or is it just not knowable?
Actually it's not knowable. I think there's a truth to it, and it's that it is a continuum, and that it's a human desire to give it a line.
Yeah,
to give it a date.
Well, maybe we come back to these practical rules then, because the abortion.
Yes, exactly.
Line is a practical.
Yes, and we need to have maybe in laws need these lines and another kind of logic. I would say that the logic of life is this logic of the continuum, and it's even the logic of being then, because it's not only life has this continuum in itself. What is life? What is living? But then when it comes to human societies, when it comes to law, economies, when it comes to organizations, we need to make all these definitions. And our language is moving in that direction. We want to have fixed definitions, and we need them in certain contexts. Language can move from the poetry, which is open, to the language. Academical, or even the language of law, I think, needs to have a very fixed set of definitions.
Strict way of formulating things. Yeah.
And I do think I embrace that scale, but we need to understand that when we make these decisions, in Sweden, abortion is allowed until week 18 or week 22 with certain permission. And then we draw a line. But that line, there's no naturalness to that line.
No.
And we need to have this discussion again, because actually that line, when it comes to abortion, is drawn in regard to the ability to live of the fetus. And actually we can save fetuses in week 23. Or a lot of them.
Maybe in the future we can save them in week 17.
Exactly. Or maybe in the future we can save them when it's just an egg and a sperm.
Yeah.
And would that mean then that there are no abortions any longer?
Yeah.
And
good question.
And this question is kind of coming up as technology is moving on, medicine is moving on. And then we need to talk about this.
So then the question becomes, who is going to take care of this child, rather than...
No, I think we need to keep the rights of abortion.
Yeah.
Just because we could create a life with a sperm and an egg doesn't mean that abortion should be illegal. To me, we need to go in another direction. We need to keep talking about the complexity of abortion, because often we have also I belong to a feminist tradition that said, well, it's the woman's body, it's her right. And I think no one other than the woman can actually make this decision, as she's the body that is where it's all happening, of course. And yet we feel the need to have, actually some people are proposing that it should be up to the woman, and maybe but then we still need to draw a line, maybe at birth. Maybe in month 8, as very, very few would do abortion at such late date.
Yeah.
But here, I think I do not have a suggestion. I just think we need to look at this question anew.
Yeah. It's very difficult, because I mean, sometimes when you come from a political tradition of left and right, and you might maybe you more familiar with and feel more comfortable in the left wing camp, for instance, then it has been, at least before, very almost depicted as self-evident that of course abortion is something that is natural and that we should have, and it's the other camp is crazy talking against
and I do think it is. We also know there are.
But it's very difficult. It's very complicated.
Yes,
when it comes to questions about life and death.
Yes, we need to understand that. Yeah. I think and a lot of women. For some it's easy, but for a lot of people it's a difficult decision.
Yeah.
Also.
But maybe it doesn't have to be even when it comes to the law and jurisdiction and things like that, a line. Maybe it could be decided on an individual basis.
Mm-hmm.
You could
That's
decide,
one suggestion.
Yeah, from case to case. And you just need to, as you are delving into yourself here, use judgment from both sides, from all sides, from all involved sides here.
And especially the woman who
and
has
especially
finally
the woman,
to
of
do
course.
the final decision.
Yeah.
Yes, and where if it's very late in pregnancy, really, if I feel I can't give this baby a home, would it be better now? It is this big. It has these capacities. Is it maybe give it for abortion? I mean, to have an open and discussion about the existential questions and give alternatives, because there's so much pragmatical questions here. We do know that if we abandon abortion, it will still happen, and a lot of women will get sick or die from illegal abortions. So we need to kind of take in the concrete situation. And as we can, and I think this is the politics of it. We need to answer to the concrete situation and its risks and its thought patterns, as there are no metaphysical line to draw. Nothing magical happens between week 18 and week 23.
No,
it's
just
step
arbitrary.
by step. It's just step by step.
Yeah, and this is. Pregnancy is a very sensory and non-intellectual experience. I think
non-intellectual.
the experience of being pregnant isn't particularly intellectual. You
don't do it with your intellect,
no.
If that's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, perhaps
you
the
don't
most
think,
bodily and sensory experience that one can have, apart from some other maybe. And
sex maybe.
Sex maybe
be overwhelming in the same.
And you've taken the consequence of this in the book, and to some extent you convey your knowledge and your thoughts by way of poetry, which I love, because sometimes I think it's very difficult to use ordinary academic language to convey these kinds of feelings and thoughts that you can have around these things. And you're also very refreshingly open, I think, about the prerequisite for pregnancy, which is sex, which you've mentioned here. Without sex, no carrying on of life.
That's not true, right?
Well, today it's not exactly true.
So actually, I'm interested in sex in relation to pregnancy, not because sex leads to pregnancy, as it has been. That's not my main reason. The reason is that sex mirrors pregnancy in so many ways. And we have this old... the Virgin and the whore,
the Madonna and the
Madonna and the whore, which is I don't want to keep those apart. And sex and pregnancy both touch upon the dissolving self and the self that comes forth. So it's rather this that leads my attention towards it, rather than the, let's say, biological. That's how we, at least, have been used to create children. I remember that you have this discussion in the book that you're talking about now, which is very. But let me say something also about the poetry, because the choice to write poetry wasn't really a choice. It was by necessity, because this my first pregnancy when I was 26, it didn't fit into the words. As we said earlier, this one or two, they don't work. And you and me, I couldn't make them work either. Yeah,
you invented a new word, which was both you and me.
The guy, yes. And it just didn't fit. And to make an argument, I wrote an essay in my philosophy studies, and it was just trash. I got so frustrated. The words didn't work. The academical words didn't work. So I had to write poetry in order to kind of just start verbalizing this. And then this poetry became essays and became actually an academic book also called Phenomenology of Pregnancy, which is an anthology that I was editing. And then they also, in this book, they become theses, which is a bit of a play between the poetry and the philosophical thesis. I think that's just fun to look at how language move between these poles.
Yeah. I think it works wonderfully. I mean, I'm not a poetry expert, so I can't assess how good your poems are. But
I'm not a poet, so
but I mean,
in this book, I wanted to do its work.
You enter into some kind of different kind of flow when you read the book. When you come into these poetry parts, you kind of you don't have to understand exactly what is there. You can just feel and sense what it's trying to convey.
And as you said, this is a very. I'm happy. I'm grateful for that formulation, as that is also, as this is not just an intellectual process, it is bodily. So if you can get something out of that from the poetry, then I did succeed. If it's good poetry or not, I don't really care about. If it did that, then it did its job.
Yeah, I think it did. So, but you were mentioning here that we don't need sex to actually to procreate these days, basically, but most people do anyway.
Yes,
use that old-fashioned way.
The old-fashioned way.
But I was going to ask if you think that, or maybe you don't. Well, let's see what you say here. The possibility of pregnancy, and for some, of course, the experience of pregnancy, perhaps makes sexuality and sex drive at least partly different in women than in men.
I mean, historically, that's of course certainly true, because the risk of becoming pregnant has laid a huge
burden
on female sexuality. I don't think this. I can of course not know, but I can't really see a biological difference. But it's a huge different cultural difference that lies on female sexuality, and also the need to to know who the father is. I think that's one of the basic traits of all patriarchy. Is for the man the woman always knows this is my child biologically, and the father actually don't really know
hasn't got a clue
until we did that DNA test, maybe, but that wasn't available in historical. Well, not that far back. So of course this is central in how we organized the relations between the sexes, between the genders, and it's certainly I think right now we are in the beginning of freeing female sexuality of that burden. We can work with that because well the pill changed everything.
Yeah, well that was 60 years ago or 50.
Yes.
So
yes,
it's a long time, but
it's not. We were talking about thousands and thousands of years
true,
here. 60 years is nothing
today than they used to.
Yes, but 60 years is nothing.
No, that's true. So
in a philosophical.
We'll see what happens then with the male and female sexuality and sex drive and
also the everything in between, because I also think that I don't see a reason to keep that dualism of female and male. There's so much more in between, and when I talk about sexual practices and the sexual practices that I am part of, I find it freeing when males don't have to be male and when the females don't have to be female, when we can explore all this world of sexuality where so it's the transgender and everything, all these words that we have today. I think they can be tiresome when it comes to politics of identity and I am this and I am this, but they are also really freeing when it comes to the exploration beyond these quite locked. This is how I should be as I am.
Yeah.
A woman.
Well, I guess it's like everything else. It's on a scale. We're all on a scale, and we all have masculine and feminine energies within us. If you want to, phrase it that way. So let's talk about a little bit about the what we were talking about before here. Actually, a very deep philosophical question. When you're pregnant and you have a fetus in your body, this illusion of separation. You write that the fetus has, I mean, we can't know for certain, of course, but the fetus doesn't seem to have a sense of I, me, I.
At least the embryo doesn't.
No.
I mean, where does it begin?
Yeah, exactly. But I was thinking, I mean, even after the child has been born, even a very, very young, small child also doesn't have a sense of I, as far as I understand, even up to the age of the toddler, perhaps.
Yes, the question here is what the sense of I means.
Yeah.
Because I would say that's a continuum as well. It's not one thing that we have or don't have. It's a continuum that grows stronger. And I would say within the belly, we already have the embryos of a self. And one of such embryo is, well, the difference between touching the parts of the mother and touching your own hand, for example, or sucking your own thumb. And because it feels differently, to have this double sensation and to have this one-way sensation. Yeah. And that is one small, that's where it begins to me. That's a first very, of course, not intellectual understanding of a self, but it's a first experience of what to have a body means. And then step by step, slowly, but it starts already in the belly. And then step by step all the way. I'm not sure when we're finished and really have a self.
Or maybe we shouldn't.
At 42, maybe that's when we have a self.
42 that's the boundary. That's when we entirely understand that we are separate.
So abortion up until the age of 42 is okay.
That's a good rule. No, but I kind of tend to think that small children they know something. Or we have all known it, or we know it inside us still. I mean, we still have that newborn baby within us. Also, it's always there. But we kind of forget what we know. Then, when we get older, we're conditioned to believe that we're separate, and you are that, and I'm this, and this is something else. This is something other than you, and this family is something different than that other family, and this country is something different than that other country. So it's a continuous. Conditioning that
this is me,
this
is you.
Yeah,
this is
there's
me,
a separation.
You.
But small children don't feel that way. They don't act that way. And it's actually interesting to see how surprised they get when they can't have things immediately, and when they can't have things that are others, quote unquote. And they get really frustrated. And why do they get so frustrated? I mean, to me that shows that they come from some place. Well, this is very spiritual and deeply philosophical, but I think they might come from a place where these things aren't natural. That this is something that is just here in this three-dimensional world, that we have this separation, and it's very, very strange for these children.
And especially the stream of life, and this is a fact that within in the womb, the fetus hears the heartbeats of the mother. Hears the breathing and the intestine. It's all these rhythms going on, a change of rhythms. But it's always there, and it's part of what it means to be alive. What is always there is what is mine. My body is what I can't get away from, and that's what gives it the term. It's mine. It is me. So this is always there. So it's part of this very early selfhood. But then in birth, it could go away. And to me, this shows that, and we do know that babies, they get comforted, southering to lay and hear the heartbeats
on the chest of the
chest.
mother or the father.
Or actually,
or
any heartbeat and any breathing is also what they recognize it, of course. And they're part of this that can go away. And life is extended. We already know that experiencing, and sometimes we talk about small children as being very egoistic. But I think that's a misconception, because that would demand that they already have a very strong
sense of ego. Self,
Yes, and I understand them more in the lines that you throw out. And I do think that Well, for example, it's quite common that we have this example when the child talks on the phone with maybe granny, and it's a phone-only voice, and say, "Look, granny, I got a new toy," and you just take for granted that granny sees what you see, and that this is, of course, no, you have to tell me, or you have to send me a picture or something. I can't see what you can see, and we have to learn that we are not part of this big stream, that we are worlds within it, with different perspectives, and what we have in common separates us. That we are all experiencing, we're all part of what is alive, of life. But being part of life is to be separated from other living beings.
Well, this life, this physical three-dimensional life, anyway.
Yes, I'm talking about this life. That's all I know anything about.
But I can sense sometimes that small children, they know things, and I think they see things and feel things and sense things that they then later forget. They have kind of psi abilities, perhaps. That we would call psi abilities that are later forgotten because it's not. I mean, their parents and the grown up environment that they're in, they get scared by these things, and they're not encouraged to continue doing it.
I'm not so sure that I have seen that, but of course there is another perception of life when you don't have this fixed borders. When you don't have the separateness of the sharing yet. And that, because that you need to keep learning, that keeps growing. So that is a certain kind of knowledge, which we still have somewhere in the back of our consciousness, but it becomes further and further back as we focus on ordering and making borders.
But there are some instances, and you have some beautiful examples in the book, where even an adult can in a natural way feel this oneness. For instance, the rider and the horse. When you ride a horse, you need to be, in some ways at least, one with the horse, because otherwise it doesn't work.
You need to be part of one movement.
One movement, So it's, I mean, you're not part of the horse's body, but you're part of the movement, and which is a very important part of the horse also when it's moving anyway, because
it's being a centaur.
It's being a centaur, and the horse, of course, needs to feel you on its back and what you want to do, and sense where you want to go and what you're doing. So that's and also another example, of course, is what we have been mentioning here: the orgasm. When two people have an orgasm together, it's kind of a feeling of dissolvement, almost.
You don't need to have it together.
Not even that. But when you have it together with another person, it's even more salient, because then it's two people dissolving into some kind of oneness. But it passes very quickly, unfortunately. But then you have an inkling that there is something here that is bigger than this
than the self
life of separation.
Yes, the orgasm is not called the small death for nothing.
For nothing, no.
It's something like... I'm not really fond of that. It's become one of these sexual prejudices to me, that you should have orgasm at the same time. That's sort of finer than you have succeeded with something.
I know what you're saying,
I'm not really fond of that. Actually, I prefer to feel the orgasm of the other. If I'm having an orgasm on my own at the same time, I don't get that.
You miss out on the other person's orgasm.
Yes,
in a way.
So I get twice.
I
get two orgasms
that's nice.
if we take them one at a time.
I like that.
That's. I just think we have so many ideas about what is good, better sex, and
it's
what
probably
is
a
lesser.
Prejudice, as you say, or a conditioning, or a
at
habit,
least it's a cultural
thing,
pattern that this is, and you should have it often in like movies, etc. You should have simultaneous orgasm in the missionary position by only penetration, and that's also another of these this is how it should be.
Yeah.
You should, and very few women can actually get orgasm by purely missionary penetration. And so it's just all these conceptions.
I know, concepts that don't work really. Just go with the flow and let people be people and find their own pleasure in their own way.
Yes.
Together or
separately.
Or
groups or whatever.
Groups. Yeah, whatever works.
Whatever works.
Whatever makes you tick. Yes. So yeah, we've been speaking for a long time, and it's so interesting. I have just, as I said, I have too many questions here, but there is so much so many deep concepts around pregnancy and giving birth and all that. But I mean, we could go on for hours. But let's just go back to finally here to talk a little bit about the society that we're living in and how you see science and academia and so on, and in the light of what you have been writing about and what we've been talking about here today, are you comfortable with the prevailing materialist worldview that when you ponder pregnancy, for instance, and its human implications, and also all the other things that we've been talking about here today, what is consciousness and all? Do you feel comfortable with this prevailing materialist worldview, or would you like it to broaden and to be something different?
Yes. I don't enjoy the reductionist materialism where matter is, as I said earlier, purely passivity in patterns of causality. But I like matter. I think we have this old heritage of the separation between the, let's say, spiritual and consciousness,
Cartesian,
soul, the Cartesian dualism, and this res extensa, purely extended matter. And I think that one is very unfortunate. And I'm not comfortable in that one at all, especially now that we have a tendency then to skip res cogita, the spirit side, the thinking side, and only keep res extensa. That is a very reductionist and poor worldview that is no fun at all and not true.
Not true.
No. But to me, my interests does not lead me to just emphasize the spiritual side, which could be one response to this. My response is to work with the concept of matter, to make that one living, self-forming, and also including, not separating from, let's say, spiritual side. That it is, we do these abstractions. The thinking takes place in a living matter. So this is where I want to dwell, not jump from one part of this dualism to another, but to re-understand, reconceptualize what matter.
Yeah, after all, we are in a physical world.
Yes,
we've been born into it, and so there's probably some meaning to that and some point to that. And
I says actually in this last book, I was kind of, it's very close to our materiality as. Pregnancy is very much a material process, as is sex. But it doesn't. Sex is so closely also to fantasy, and that just shows how they are truly interconnected, or comes from the same root, or however you want to formulate it. We have a tendency to think that philosophy is when we just move into abstraction, but I want to stay in. Eating and shitting, breathing in, breathing out, giving birth, having sex, all these things that we sometimes think, well, that can't be philosophical. And the most provoking might be to say to have a shit is philosophical. Of course it doesn't have to be, but it's part of being this sort of, to be alive is to keep protecting your borders, your limits. If you come with a knife and try to stab me, I will try to protect my borders. I want my skin to be whole, both physiological and psychological somehow. But we can only be alive if we are permeable.
Permeable.
Okay. I think is the word. that our borders are continually violated, so to say, but because that's the only way to stay alive. We need to put something in and something comes out. And we breathe in and we breathe out. And in order to have a baby, we need to have something foreign coming in to our body one way or another.
Or if it's foreign, like you can debate that whether it's
a sperm.
Foreign. Yeah, well,
foreign, somehow it's foreign. It comes from another body.
The ways we have been taught, I mean, led to believe that things work.
But if I talk about my body as this within this skin, a sperm has somehow to come. My body doesn't produce sperms.
It isn't foreign. The second the instant it enters your body, it isn't foreign to you. Then it's in your body.
Foreign here doesn't have to be like a negative term. I mean, food is foreign in the same way. The air is foreign because it's not.
Yes. I mean,
so the
I've
sperm
been
is in the
meditating
same
on
way.
that lately. That I am the atmosphere, because I take in the atmosphere all the time. And it changes into something different in my body. So I mean, of course, I am it, and it is me.
But it's not. It's more than you.
It's more than me, and I am a more than me also. I'm more than just this body.
That's why I also want to work with this concept of I, because actually the Swedish title "Jagar himmel och hav", the title is with a small J in the beginning, which doesn't really work because writing
I is always a capital letter. But
yes,
if you
I
write
would
it with
prefer to have it with a small
okay.
I. That it's not me, this social being, but there are these layers within us where we are more than the capital letter I, so to say. We have all these layers within ourselves, and these are in these layers we're also deeply interconnected. And I would go with your meditation experience on this level. And we, especially in a very rational Western society, we are trained not to be there. We don't have that many practices to train.
Do you meditate?
I have such a tradition. I do now and then when I need it. I've done it a lot with my children. So I have. I know it. I have my word, etc.
Well, you can do it in many ways.
Yes,
I mean, it's,
of course. I have a mantra. Of course, you can do it in many ways. But so I think we should have more practices and embrace it, because it can also take place in art, in thinking, in so many places. So we need to develop our language and to be in other places than in our social language game and in our social power games. We will always live in these parts, the social life, but it's not all we are.
No, very wise. Jonna, to tie in with the first, or one of the first questions that I asked, is there any situation in life where philosophy is not relevant?
No.
No.
Of course there are. If you need to solve a practical problem and you just have to solve this, and you know it's all the basic components, you know what they are, and these components work in. Of course, there's problem solving without philosophy, but as a subject in life, life is philosophy.
Life is philosophy.
Yes.
Wonderful. Jonna Bornemark, thank you so much for a beautiful conversation and for taking time to join the show, and good luck with your books and all your coming endeavors.
Thank you for having me.
If you like this video and other interviews and talks on Mind the Shift, please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all the support. And you can follow Mind the Shift on Facebook and Instagram, and you can follow me, Anders Bolling, on all the main social media and also on medium.com. Thank you.